Hello and welcome to Poems On. This is the sixth show of the second season. The theme is loss and absence. And for my guests, I have John Foy, a new guest, and as a returning guest, Greg Delanty. So welcome, guys. It's good to see you. And to get the ball rolling, I'm going to go to the brand new guest and ask John to start us off.
Okay, thanks, Sal. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with both of you. Let me start by saying that. And I'll start off with a poem. It's pretty straightforward. It's called Paterfamilias, and it's about my father. He fought in World War II, and he died here in the States in 1997. And this poem is essentially about my thinking about him. Paterfamilias, John C.W. Foy, 1919, 1997. I try to think of what I'd say were you to come back tonight, sublunary, though not entirely terrestrial, wanting maybe to come home and talk about the howitzers, the shelling, and the hail. I know that if I tried to reach for you, to hold you in my arms, I'd fail the way Aeneas did in that pathetic underworld where 3 times he tried to apprehend what he had loved, and the has-beens laughed by Cocytus. Clear-headed now, with eyes rinsed out by rain, no more the fool, I wouldn't ask you why you'd come or how it was contrived, though I would tell you all about Catherine and Christopher. Christopher you never knew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I like here is that this simultaneously, it looks backward, but in the end, the sentiment is to present the future, is to connect the past with the future. And I like that. I think it's healthy to see yourself as the link, but to take care to look both ways. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Sal.
Thanks, John. I have nothing to say. I like it though very much. Thank you.
Well, in that case, take it away then.
As Al says, and I think John may have said it, it's a serious theme we have tonight, but one of my poems will be a kind of funny poem, so, but not the first one. And it's an elegy for my mother when she was on her deathbed, and I had got home just in time when she was in hospice for the dying during cancer, where she died of cancer. There is one term in it, noble call. A noble call in Cork is, as you talked about, sing-songs. We used to have a lot of sing-songs in Cork when we were growing up. And in Cork, there's a particular tradition where the person who sang has the right to call the next singer, and the next singer has to sing. So I'll be noble calling you, even though already we know that you're going to be singing, right? But they didn't know. All right? And to my mother, Mary Mount Hospice, Cork. It's about 6 verses, 4 lines. Tonight I keep watch over your dying. The most peaceful night I ever knew. I suppose it's the release of your going, drawn out over chemo months into years. I soothe your agitated hand. You lie under the nightlight's nimbus, reflected within the black window. Your bed and you fly in the pane above the city's Saturday night din. Pure Chagall. You head into the stars, over Summerhill, Capwell, Evergreen, the Black Ash. Hover above familiar streets and lanes, bars, folk singing. There is no need to dash. Your name has been noble called. Sing South of the Border one last time. You raise your voice above the Lee, the town you hauled a lifetime of plastic bags through, bowing into the drizzle, drudging home along North Main Street, up Blarney Lane, or City of Hills, or Frisco, or Rome, or Buenos Aires, or Varanasi. Rain weeps on the pen. Your hand must be waving adios. Ma, the night sky reflects our city below. Now every light's a votive candle, your Fatima. Behold the glass darkly. There you go.
Thanks, Greg.
That's really beautiful, Greg.
Thank you.
I have to.
Would your mother? Go ahead, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a beautiful poem in and of itself, but it does remind me of something Seamus Heaney wrote about his mother, which is one of my favorite poems. It's a sequence called Clearances, which you may know, and
I do, but it's yeah. But everybody gets. I remember reading with Seamus. Yeah, it's about my mother. It's about his. That's about his mother.
right.
That poem, when I put her up on Facebook, got over 1,000 responses. It's a Cork poem, you know.
No, it's beautiful.
So you
So
go
Greg,
now.
I love the simplicity of the final line, the final sentence. There you go. It's just so
Yeah.
so direct and unadorned, and has a kind of simple finality to it. And I think that's very effective.
something we're going to see Greg continue to do is he can put plain spoken and a colloquial speech adjacent with loftier speech, loftier phrases, and it all works. It works together beautifully. It's all part of his voice. Now, Greg, I wanted to ask you: was your mother a good singer?
Well, she wasn't an opera singer, but she could sing for sure. But everybody sang in these things, even the people who couldn't sing. It
Yes.
wasn't an occasion for good singers. It was an occasion for everybody to be allowed to sing or say a poem, for that matter. No, she wasn't. She was a good singer in an amateurish way, you know what I mean? But they'd sing all sort of the 30 song or South of the Border, one of the things. And, you know, it was a great thing. And it's kind of gone now, really, with all the phones and everything. I mean, it's so sad. I mean, even though we still have them when I go home. And my neighbors, I call to my neighbors, you know.
Well, I envy you that as a tradition, because we didn't have anything like that when I was growing up, and I sure would have liked it if we had.
There was no radios in the car even. When we come back from the seaside, we'd be singing songs all along, and everybody would would sing, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
Is that it's not, it's not. You've got to be a performer to sing. No,
Yeah,
you just
well,
have to be a person.
No, actually, sometimes I found the most beautiful singing were by those people who couldn't sing. There was something
Yes.
really beautiful about that, you know.
I hear you. All right. Well, I've already read my mother's Me by My Mother's Bedside poem on another show. So I have something a little more modest here called My Mother's Baking Dish, but it is about loss and the memory of loss. My mother's baking dish. Cradle of 1,000 childhood pies, the milky Pyrex dish had shattered at my adult feet when it slipped from my hands after a washing in the kitchen sink. Flying far and wide across the floor, the glassy shards and splinters scattered out beyond where I could see them. Picking up the biggest pieces carefully, I filled a dustpan with the jagged fragments, braving the newborn edges with my fingertips, respectful of their bite. And not until a thorough sweeping and a vacuuming did I return to walking in bare feet. Months later, when the risk of sudden cuts had dimmed, I got up from the table, careless, and a familiar trill of pain shot through my big toe when I put weight on it. Sitting right back down, I ran my hand over the guilty place until it spoke again and guided me to its removal. There, beside the blood, a sliver, white as milk, improbably against the odds, reminded me how memory returns out of proportion to its first importance.
I love the end of that last line. But for some reason, I think I've seen this poem before when I read it this morning, you know. Did you publish it anywhere? Or
Not yet. This is new. I don't think it's in my last book, but let me just quickly check because I think it's new.
Is the Pyrex dish? Do you have a Pyrex dish in some other poem? Anyway, it's good though. It's great. Thank you. Don't touch the last line.
Yeah, I like to get serious in the last couple of lines.
What's interesting is that it's very, every time you're writing, often when you're writing about loss and absence, one so often returns to one's mother. The loss of a mother is a terrible thing, and it seems to be an immemorial subject for so many poems.
Yeah, I've got a lot of poems about my mother at different stages of her life and also at the end of her life. And Greg, like you, I was fortunate to be able to be with my mother in her last days. And you said you got there just in time. And I'm glad that happened for you because these are things that you can't get back if you don't get them. Well, we've made a circle. Shall we go back to John?
Sure.
All right, Al, this does make sense because my next poem is, it's about the loss of a mother. But in this case, it's not my own mother. It's Odysseus meeting the ghost of his mother in the underworld. This is after Homer, the Odyssey, book 11. It's called Son of Telamon. Sick with fear by the blood hole, I saw the fighters dragging around their gory combat gear, each one craving recognition, sympathy, so many of them still amazed, going through the dark. Here came one, an old friend, slowly, whispering now in a voice I used to know, coming to plead that I set up his oar atop a cairn along the beach in memory of a simple man and the good work he used to do in the waves. Then my mother came, my mother, remote among the houseless dead, those ghosts that hung about in silence by the blood. I cried for her. I cried for the futility of my embrace, where all was only the negative image of what used to be. Then the rock thrower came, son of Telamon, standing apart, bemired and bemused. Even here, though I called to him by name, Aias would not speak to me and turned away and went back deeper into Erebus. Who would ever call him by his name again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Would you remind me, please, John, what Aias or from Ajax's beef with Odysseus was that makes him turn his back?
Right. Well, after they were both on the Greek side, and when Achilles is killed, Odysseus and Aias fight over who will take possession of Achilles' arms, and of course Ulysses wins, and Aias loses the fight. and does not get the arms and goes off. I believe he kills himself, if I remember the details rightly. But he goes off to the underworld, embittered forever. And even when he sees Odysseus in the underworld, as when Aias is a ghost, he won't talk to Odysseus, and simply turns away and goes back deeper into Erebus, where no one will ever call him by his name again.
That's very good end.
Yep.
That's a good end as well now. That's a really good last verse. I was a bit mystified, John. Sorry, I'm sure like Al, I'm thinking of remembering my Homer and the kind of background, the lesser figures, or the lesser written about figures. The old friend is Odysseus, right?
Well, actually, no. Here came one, an old friend. That actually refers to the. It's an allusion to the ghost of Elpenor.
Yeah,
that's Elpenor.
No, I know that. No, that's what I thought of as well. That you put the thing, but isn't that's fine? That just tricked me because doesn't Odysseus want to put the oar down too in his final voyage after he comes back? So that just confused me with the two. Maybe something to think about, because he leaves Ithaca after coming back, after getting back from Troy, and he wants to put the oar. So just for a moment there, I got confused, you know.
I know what you mean.
Elpenor was the guy that fell off the roof.
Elpenor was drunk and he fell off.
Fell off the roof.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, just think about that one. Not that I could be. I mean, I'm not just saying I'm wrong, but I just got confused there.
Sure.
I was momentarily.
In the text, he actually does ask Odysseus to please set up his oar atop a cairn.
I do remember that part. I don't remember the Ajax part, but I do remember that part. I do remember. Poor Elpenor, I felt sorry for Elpenor. He got forgotten.
Yeah, they left him there dead. They didn't bury him because they had to leave the island.
He got out of there quickly. I know.
Yeah. Well, I have one more question, John, because as you say, this is after an episode in the Odyssey. And so we understand that it's not any kind of attempted translation, but when I've written poems that were after things that happened in the Odyssey. And one thing that you could have done, because the language of this poem is also evocative of modern day warfare, you could have made a clear connection kind of to a modern, to a layer of meaning that's modern. But I'm curious, the way that you said it, you're keeping us back in that context. And why did you think about making a connection and elect not to do it? And or what got you to think about writing a poem after this particular moment?
Well, just because I found this is all from the text of book 11, and I just found his encounters with the ghost of Elpenor and the ghost of his mother and the ghost of Aias just so poignant and sad, and especially when he tries to hug his mother 3 times, and she slips through his arms because she's just a ghost, and that of course is what Virgil plays off of when he has the same thing happen to Aeneas, except in Aeneas' case, it's his father.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful parallel there, as there is in so many cases when you look at the 2 great epics.
Okay. Greg? Sure.
Since we're in the underworld, I'm just going to read an 8-line poem in memory of Ed Epstein, and it's called Elegy for Somebody with Alzheimer's. This was originally published in the Irish Times and then appeared later in a selected Delanty, but I have putting in the next book called The Professor of Forgetting. It's completely rewritten. You'd hardly know it was the same poem. Elegy for Somebody with Alzheimer's. Whoever you are has escaped, can't be traced. the record of all you are to yourself erased, leaving your body like a baying bloodhound, confounded, smelling the cold, hard ground, staring helplessly across the impossibly wide river, having lost the trail on this side of the banks of Lethe, sniffing the air, not a scent, not a sign of a soul print anywhere.
Mm. The hounds, that really works. I love I love the use of the hounds and the inability to pick up the trail. It really points out what kind of gone it is.
Yep.
And I think it's so hard to do rhyming couplets like that in shorter lines, and these are just done so beautifully, so smoothly, and with a very light touch, and yet the rhymes are all perfect.
Thank you.
Maybe not perfect in a technical sense. When I say perfect, I mean they're sonically in line with each other.
Yeah.
I know a lot of poets who are very sticky about this, and they would say, well, you can't rhyme bloodhound with ground because one is 2 syllables and the other is 1. But I don't follow that line of thinking at all.
Yeah, really. He said bullshit.
Dog shit, hound shit.
But Greg, my point is that I like that. I'm fully.
No, I know that. Everybody. I'm having a laugh, man. No. I'm not. I know you do. You said that you liked it. I couldn't imagine anybody saying such a thing unless they're talking in particular about some particular poem, whatever.
Oh, Greg, there's a lot of these people about. Maybe they.
My dear man, I've been around for 50 years writing poems. I know this.
Well, it's the sound. I think we're in agreement. It's the sound. We're not counting syllables.
Right.
So
that's too fussy.
Wow. Well, I can't, I have to go in a different direction. So I'm going to read it's a narrative poem, or what would be a piece of a narrative. It's actually a short part. It's a narrative poem that covers a short part of a novel that I wrote about 50 years ago that was never published. But it lives on in short bits here and there, and in a long narrative that I wrote, basically rewriting a novel as a narrative poem. This bit is not from that. This is from a number of years before that, but it's designed to be very cinematic, and you'll understand the situation right away because it declares itself quite clearly. It's called Morning Glory. Waking up alone just after dawn, she feels the pillow next to hers. The deep impression of his head has cooled. She rolls up out of bed, goes over to the window, pulls back the curtain, looks down at the driveway, just brightening below. The Bronco's gone, his throwdown getaway with the roof racks. He's left the Escalade to her. It has the kiddie seat. She hears their daughter breathe asleep across the hall and feels a pang. Abandoned. Yes, it must be. And she'd known for weeks something was coming by the way he'd made each normal move deliberate. But part of her resists. Some other reason for leaving before Saturday begins. It's possible, she thinks. It could be he'll be back with milk and waffles by the time we'll all be getting up. She has to know. She holds back her emotions long enough to check the airline luggage in the closet. It's there. She struggles to convince herself that all can still be well. But there's a doubt. It's caught down in her throat and won't be swallowed. There's one place left, she thinks, the leather bag he wouldn't throw out from his father's things after we broke the house up. It's upstairs in the left attic room. That suitcase has some kind of special meaning for him. Up she goes. The seldom walked on steps creak out a protest. He'd have woke me up for sure, she thinks, if he'd come up here. At the top, she turns left on the landing, lifts the latch, and edges sideways through the narrow door, its white paint thick with layers, past the stacks of boxed up Christmas lights and ornaments, the bolts of fabric. Over by the eaves, she ducks her head and looks under the window. The morning light is slanting, cool, and brilliant. The dust is undisturbed and thick beside the wall, except for a neat rectangle on the floor. The dark hardwood gleams fresh inside. A drop blooms darker in it, then another.
The then another is very good at the end. The sentence just stop.
So it's clear.
Touch, Al. A very light narrative touch in that final stanza when you explain that she sees on the floor the dust, of course, except for a neat rectangle where the bag had been, right?
Yes.
And so in other words, it's gone. He's gone. It's all gone.
Yep.
And she only, that's just a very light-handed touch there, narratively. That's beautiful.
Well, thanks. And then she cries a couple of teardrops that drop into the glossy part of the floor. I tried to make it very cinematic, as though it were a movie scene. Well, thank you. I'm glad it's everybody gets it. It's clear enough. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I'm happy about that. That's an example of one that, yeah, go ahead.
Al, this is a story of loss, of course, the loss of a partner, right? Who ran off. How central is this particular scene to the bigger picture that you were working on?
It's the second scene of the novel. The novel begins with his character who's left his wife and his child without a trace. And he goes in search of a person that he knew years before. And the novel opens in a different place where the husband has gone. So you start with him. And then the second chapter or the second scene, you're back, you see the impact on the wife. And then as the story goes on, it's a parallel story that carries his travels and what happens to him and what he discovers and thinks he discovers. And in the meantime, also shows us the consequences that he's left behind. So it's the river runs in two channels, one above and one underground, basically. And all of those are in the very long poem is about 1,700 lines, and that covers all of this. But this one particular scene, as I said, I wrote quite a few years ago. I wrote the long poem just last summer or the summer before. There was time during the pandemic.
Yes, indeed.
So, okay, enough of me. Back to you, John.
Okay. Well, this is another poem about a mother. This one is my mother. It appeared in my second book, Night Vision, which was published by St. Augustine's Press in 2016. Condolences. How can I help you with your grief? Though maybe I shouldn't even try if truth be told. There's no relief, really. Your mother had to die someday, and how unfit a man you'd be if you couldn't make believe you were tough enough to take it and move on? How fake the higher calculus, being at peace and all that. You've lost her now, few care, and nothing can help, and no one knows the cost you've paid. But everyone knows we die like dogs in the deep snow.
Yeah. Now I'm going to turn a comment that you made about one of Greg's poems back in your direction, because the way that the line endings carry the rhymes, but the sense of the sentences, carry on, disguises the form of this really, really, really nicely. Talking about a light touch. I always like it when rhymes don't stick out like maraschino cherries on the top of the cake, and you've woven you've woven them in really, really, really well here. So there was also something else that I got out of reading this poem off the page about the tone here, and I'm not sure how I react to the speaker until I get to the end, and then the end is direct and undeniable, because it seemed rather callous the way that he speaks to the person addressed, until you get to the end, and then that's the leveler. It puts us all on the same footing.
Oh, that's a good readout. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's with loss comes bitterness, especially when a mother dies. And I won't talk about the 7 stages of loss because I think that's bullshit. But for me, there's just bitterness and anger. And this happened a long time ago, and I still feel bitterness and anger.
Yep.
It doesn't go away. It doesn't transfer. It doesn't subside into something nicer and sweeter. At least not for me.
Well, one of the only resources that as writers we have is that we can at least cover the territory and get some things out into the world where others can share it. Even if it doesn't lessen the way that you feel, it connects you to others who feel in a similar way.
Yeah.
And that's kind of healing in itself, really, isn't it?
I think so. I feel bad for people who not only can't express themselves in some literary form, but can't express themselves in a personal way about their deepest feelings. And there are a lot of people like that, and they're in need of any kind of healing that we or anyone else can bring them. Somebody's got to give voice to people who can't talk about those things.
Thanks, Sal.
I like the higher calculus is very good. That part, and of course the end. But I didn't cop it was a kind of when I read it first, an irregular kind of a sonnet, Anyway, very good.
Well,
it's a very rough.
Irregular.
But it follows at the line endings. The rhyme pattern follows it, and again with sonnets, you've got to find some way to not let those rhymes just kind of lie there. They've got to carry on, so they don't stand out. To me, even when you get to the end, I mean, you've got that really proximate rhyme in the last 2 lines in a sonnet, but you don't want to be hitting people over the head with them. You've got to say enough with the rest of the lines to make them work. So anyway, very good.
One of the challenges of writing this is that it's in a prevailing tetrameter mode, and it's so that was a challenge, because if you're doing rhyming in tetrameter, it can start to, the rhymes can stick out like maraschino cherries if it's on the right.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of room to contextualize them.
Right, exactly.
in an artful way. Yeah, excellent point. For you folks out there listening, beware. with tetrameter. Okay, Greg.
I was going to do the funny one now, but after your two, I'm just going to stick with the theme of what you. Well, there's dust in this one, and it's about my mother, John, and dust. Al appears in
Yes.
your one. So my mother was tidy freak. You know,
Yep.
she was compulsive. So this is where this poem comes from. Um, and it's a sonnet, and it's a kind of more regular sonnet than John's, and it might be anyway. The dust gathers. Where does all the dust come from? My mother would ask, sweeping the house away, vacuuming the vacuum, dusting the duster. War was declared on the dust, day in, dust out. Back then it was a mystery. She would frantically polish a sun ray, highlighting undercover motes in our dust-free home, banning books condemned dust gatherers. We had no notion it was our own skin mostly, and that of Catherine, John Bray, our grandmothers, Liam Cunningham, Ethel Barry, Auntie Claire, Moses the milkman, the meter man, the grandfathers I never met. The dust drifts alive in the air. The living and the dead settle together everywhere.
What was the history of that house? How many generations had lived there?
No, it wasn't, not many. I mean, we were the first generation, but they were all, the neighbours would be. In those times, in Ireland at that time, it still had a country. We were the first generation out kind of out of the country, and people would, the neighbours, I still in touch with my neighbours, they'd come in out of the house all the time. There was no, the door was always open. It literally often was just open. And so the bread man, Moses was the name of our milkman. So, you know, it just, a sense that I suppose that things live on somehow, you know. And some, Liam Cunningham is an old friend of mine now. He went to school with him. He was the next door neighbour and so forth. But it wasn't an ancient house like my grandmother's house. Maybe was older, but not much.
Well, had the grandparents that you didn't know ever been in the house, though?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this is.
Well, my grandfather, one of them. But still, there would have been things from that house that would have been. There were still things like dust from that was taken.
That was carried on.
In fact, I still have things downstairs in America that's dust from the Irish houses that I brought over in a box. You know.
Yes. Yeah. This is one of the things that I liked about it was and you say that there's a funny poem coming up, but there's a lot of humor in this one because of the single-mindedness of your mother's impulse to clean. And my mother was like that too. So I understand it. But what I liked about it is, on the one hand, you know, it's the dust be gone. We've got to not have dust. And yet the dust is a kind of richness in this poem of all of these people. And so the fact that you can't ever get rid of all the dust is really a blessing.
Well, usually, most of the time. I mean, I had to hide even my books even under the bed if you find them. That's the truth.
Yeah, I recognize the impulse.
That happens here too. By the way, Greg, one thing, you talked about this being a sonnet, and I think it's beautifully experimental in the fact that it's a 14-liner and it's got rhymes, but it's in terza rima, right?
No, I don't. I think I don't talk in John in stiff meter ways, you know. And I think that a lot of that and I'm not alone. Well, I thought I was alone in thinking this, and that I didn't have an ear. It's Delanty rhythm, I suppose, in one level, but also I went to school when I was going to school, as you say, high school and so forth. They taught us what all the poems and the sonnets, the Shakespeare sonnets, and they talked about them being in iambic pentameter. Well, they weren't to my ear in iambic pentameter, because the way Cork people speak is quite different than the way, and actually Cork accent, my accent is the closest thing in the English accent to the Elizabethan, according to the BBC, and to Gaelic. So I don't agree with enforcing a rhythm and say that this is it and so like that. No, it's fine as a kind of what would you say? There is such a thing, but it's not. It's far less iambic than people make it out to be. And it's
Greg, no, I would agree with you completely. What I was referring to, though, was the rhyme scheme. It points back to Dante, and that it's terza rima. And so when you're pointing back to Dante, you're talking about loss and things gone and past.
Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, well, the underworld, like my mother's dead. So the next poem I will read is from a book called No More Time, and it's about the death of the natural world and the living, and it's kind of heaven, hell, and purgatory, and that's all written in terza rima. Sorry, I don't know, my brain got screwed up there. Yeah, no, well, more screwed up, right? And yes, I used the Dante all the way down, and then a couple at the end. It's a kind of a love poem to all the living and the dead.
No, it's beautiful. It's
sure.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know what I was thinking. What was I thinking? Sorry, excuse me.
Well, all's well. Well, again, I've got to go. This is much more abstract than, I mean, I love dust because it's with us all the time. This is more abstract. The poem is called Waiting, and it's a little essay about the nature of time and action and reaction, sequence and consequence. Waiting. And it's got a kind of an epigraph at the top, which is in counterpoint to the poem. Waiting. The crow is crazed by thirst, yet perseveres. Stone after stone is dropped into the pitcher. So that's a reference to the Aesop crow with the pitcher finally getting to the water after dropping enough stones in the pitcher. Pardon me. The time between the question and reply. The mind's a spinning top stuck in a crack. The body's going through the daily motions, aimless. The soul still holds its breath, bending, tending beyond, insensible to art or pleasure. Though the stream runs deep below that feeds them both, the landscape's parched above. Appearances continue to deceive. I undertake an exercise. I think, because it calms the tremors for a moment, of other times like this. How recollection retrieves the outcomes and the turning points, but not the leading up. Between the coma and the plunge to death, between the offers and acceptances, refusals, or between the gray fall and the wind that tilts it suddenly to winter. What remains is what things came to in the end, and not these days in limbo, lost to memory.
That's very sort of rolling and meditative, Al, in an Eliadic sort of way.
Yeah, I get that way sometimes. Tim Steele said that I write little essays, and this is a good example of one it's a thought piece. But I do think that it says something about how we remember, that we remember we remember we remember when things change and the outcomes, but right before things change, it's very hard to remember what led up to, to the dramatic moments, at least for me. So
it seems very different from your other poems and your other work that I know from earlier, because it is so abstract. Well, it seems like a departure.
Well, if you read through, it's kind of it's a streak. There are maybe 15 or 20 poems that are like this. And then there are a lot that are narrative, and there are a lot that I could definitely, in much the same way that looking at just the poems that you guys have picked, you cover a lot of ground stylistically, I think, in terms of what you choose to write about, and what the stance is, what the tone is, how the forms change. I think I have a range that wouldn't be noticeable unless you read maybe 20 poems at a shot, and then it would start to stick out.
I'm looking forward to you reading the long poem, Al.
That's.
This one hasn't kind of sunk into me yet, but I didn't have enough time to take them in,
That's okay. I'll when I introduce it, I think I'll make it a lot easier for people listening to it.
The one you just read, I mean, it hasn't sunk in yet. I'm a bit.
Oh, all right. I'm glad I sent you.
The long one I do get, I think, is very good.
Oh, good.
Will I go on and read?
I just read.
John.
So
right.
it's It's
Sorry,
John.
Excuse me, John.
Okay, no problems, Greg. This next poem I'm going to read is an answer to all those fussy formalists that we were just talking about before. This is a poem called Funeral, and it was published in my most recent book, No One Leaves the World Unhurt, which won the Donald Justice Poetry Prize and was published by Autumn House Press in 2021. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Funeral. No word really rhymes with funeral. There are some that almost rhyme, like useful, futile, irretrievable. And then there's tuna casserole, but that's a stretch. And urinal is inappropriate. I do like brutal, crucial, cruel, and doable. And what's wrong with denial? The director of a funeral home told me I would leave this mortal life. He was beyond contemptible. But that was long ago when my father died. He sold us bogus death certificates that were, for legal purposes, not usable. His cufflinks were incomparable.
Now, talking about range.
But it's clever, though. It's clever, it's clever.
The thing is, if you see it on the page, you can see that all the words in italics are sort of.
They're all italicized.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we see that.
Yeah.
We see that.
From what I can see, from what I've been able to determine, there is no word that is a perfect rhyme for funeral.
It depends on your accent, John.
What are some candidates?
Funeral, my old pal. No, funeral, my old pal. What a guy.
Right.
Well, but it's nice to see poems that play with language, but you've done more than that in this case. You're playing with the language and kind of kicking around the idea of half rhymes and slant rhymes. But at the same time, by introducing that dramatic situation at the end, you allow us to fill out the mood of the character in a way that is really satisfying. Because by the time we get to the end, we know exactly how he feels about what happened back then. And yet we're brought there through a sequence of play, really, of playing with words. So I think, I mean, that's a good example of, I've never read a poem like that anywhere else. And so that gives it a kind of success that that I really like. I don't know how you got the idea for it, but I think it's a great idea.
That's great. It's very good. John, can I ask you, this is the second one I've counted the lines and it's 14. Are you purpose? Are there a lot? Are the whole sequence of these? Because they seem to be funeral poems in there. In the condolences was another one, wasn't it?
Yeah, are you referring to the unrhymed lines, the 14?
No, no. I'm just saying. No, I've just the two ones that were the two poem. One of the
Condolences. Was it Condolences?
The condolences poem was 14 lines, and the funeral poem was 14 lines.
Right.
Were you doing that on purpose? Were you trying to make them irregular sonnets or something? Or they
when I was much younger, Greg, I loved the poet Robert Lowell, and Robert Lowell had at least two books, I think, Histories and another book whose name the title is
the Dolphin and everything. They're full of the.
But they were rough, unrhymed sonnets.
Yeah. Well, they weren't always unrhymed, but yeah, for sure. Yeah,
they were 14 lines.
Sometimes, yeah. For sure.
Sort of, rough. I just refer to them as rough sonnets for lack of a better term. But I like them. I think it's a good thing, and you're still pointing back to the tradition of the sonnet.
Yeah. I had a poem called Loosestrife, which is 14 lines in the Atlantic, and the editor, a friend of mine now, David Barber, called it an American sonnet. After that, and it's unrhymed as well. You know what I mean? Or if there's rhyme in it.
Was that a compliment or an insult?
Oh, I thought it was a compliment because it ended with US.
Okay.
And it's Loosestrife picking up everything. But anyway, no.
No, I'm with you, Greg.
No, but I'm just curious to know. So, but what I'm asking, is this part of a sequence in the next book? Or?
No, not really. I just have a lot of these scattered about.
Yeah. No, they work very well together in a sequence, too, you know.
Yeah.
I have one more technical question for you, John. When you get near the end of the poem and you said that the death certificates were not usable, why didn't you use unusable?
I could have. I mean, I could have, but I just thought that I don't know, not useful.
Not usable
not
is
usable.
different than unusual.
Yeah.
Not usable is different than unusable.
Right.
And I think it probably has to be not usable. You could.
It's got more.
What you're really saying is useless. Like it was useless because the fucker robbed. Like, you know.
But yes, that's the sentiment.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the beat of the line, the sort of the natural sequence of beats, they're not usable, seem to carry more emotional force.
I agree with you, but I wanted to hear you say it. Yeah, excellent. Okay,
thanks.
Greg, number 4. You're welcome.
How are your socks, John? Have you any problem with your socks this morning?
I'm so glad you're going to read this, Greg, because this is one of my favorite poems in your pack.
Yeah, I like this one too, but I'm not wearing socks.
Thank you.
Anyway, The Mystery of Socks. There should be an asylum for single socks. Lost, dejected, turned in on themselves. The twin sock, soulmate, doppelganger gone AWOL, on the lam, slipping through a time-space warp, somewhere within the module of the washing machine, or dryer, rattling in the cellar's deep space. Gone, we know not where, to the afterlife of socks, the Elysium of Argyle, the Valhalla of winter woolies, the Shangri-La of crew, gold toe, tennis, summerwear. Surely there's no purgatory or hell for socks. Even for absconders who walk out on partners, family, before their souls are worn threadbare, their number up. The odd time it happens, these socks get lonely for the earth. And weeks, months later, the prodigals meekly reappear under a bed, cushion, wardrobe, only to discover their partners have disappeared, passed on, unable to make it alone. But how good it is to see socks united once more, folded into each other, close, touching, at one. The deserter promising to stay put, not to take a hike, not to do a runner this time. No greater joy is known than on these occasions. Such dancing, such cavorting, such jubilation in the kingdom of socks.
Yeah. Oh, that's delicious.
The way you carry through the metaphor, Greg, and just develop it to the point where you're actually talking in your analogy about people falling apart and then coming back together. The tenderness that's there as you carry through that metaphor is so compelling and beautiful.
Yeah, it's so effective. And that's what I was speaking of earlier when I said also the juxtaposition of common speech and loftier speech. So what was it? The Valhalla of what?
Of the Valhalla of Wilterwoolies.
I love it.
And the
I actually have only I changed that this week because I had to get my manuscript in, which by the way I got eventually I had to get an extension. I emailed him later in the day saying there's a few poems I can't get. They're small things, but I changed that during the week to something else. But the Valhalla of Wilterwoolies, I said that's good. Like it's cold up in Valhalla, up in those.
Yeah.
Anyway. I liked that poem myself, and I couldn't get it published. And it's become a very popular poem now.
Well, I think I wasn't being facetious when I said at the beginning, this is one of my favorites. It is indeed, Greg, one of my favorites in the packet that you sent. And what I love about it, especially, is the way it balances humor with seriousness and the way you
yes.
Hey, John, humor is the refuge of a desperate man.
We're all desperate.
I know that. Of course we are, man. We've got this.
That's why I'm laughing.
Absolutely. Exactly. I should say desperate man, excuse me. But then again, I'd be sexist, so we better say a desperate person. Oh, or the desperate day. Okay.
Well, and
so
no
I'm
harm.
surprised that you couldn't get this published as a standalone poem.
No, it's become popular since now, though, mind you. So it's turned up in anthology, but it's still. I don't know why. It was a mystery. What are they doing? But maybe it's just funny, you know. I mean, I got lesser poems published in great places, and nobody would take this. And I say, what's wrong with them?
Well,
you know,
it just tells you that there's no clear path from what's good to what's accepted. It's a mystery.
No, it is too.
I mean, yes, it's a sock mystery.
It went missing itself for a while. It went missing itself for a while.
Right.
Yes.
Well, this is definitely a poem about loss. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And absence too.
Absence.
Anyway.
Well, you guys are setting me up because my next poem calls itself a mystery and it's about absence. But it's not funny. I have some poems that are funny, but apparently not on this theme. And so I have to get back to being earnest, which is something I like to be.
Come on, Sorry,
no,
I can't help myself. Looking forward to this.
That's okay. No.
I'm in earnest.
No harm, no foul. So this is called an Eastern European mystery, and it was written recently about a person that I care a lot about, who is very, very far away in the middle of a war zone at the moment. And so our communication has been interrupted and spotty, and there have been long gaps. So, okay, an Eastern European mystery. Ah, my dear, I think that we will never meet. It's been 4 years since we've been writing, and while we've known enough to make no promises, we've never even heard each other laugh. Still, beyond the years and distances imposed on us, we've touched each other's souls as words can do. And what we have is rare enough to wish a chance to find out more. But now you've said you hope I can be patient, that you can't write and don't know for how long. It's 3 months now, and just a word or two have made their way across the world to me. You've even said that messages I've sent to you since Christmas have been left unopened. I know exactly what would make me say I couldn't write and didn't want to know the feelings that we always talked about. And if it's what I think, I can be patient. There are times I shouldn't be important. A pure love hopes, but doesn't make demands. Now, you asked me for a list of films, both black and white and color, from the 30s to the 60s. And I've given you a dozen names that everyone should see. They'll help you with your English and our culture. I wonder who you plan to see them with. But as I think of it, I'll add one more. Make sure you see Hitchcock's Notorious, where Cary Grant convinces Ingrid Bergman to play up to Claude Rains, then marry him, and all to spy on his activities. But not before Grant falls in love with her. She carries out the plan, and he is distant, cold to her, and treats her like a whore while using her to get the information. He's torn between his duty and desire. But if he were to tell her how he felt, she'd lose the will to keep up the charade. All through the final reel, she's being poisoned. Will rescue come in time or be too late? It is a story where indifference is not to be believed, where silent love must bide its time in pain and from a distance, and selfishness is barely kept at bay.
That's a good one, Al. I will admit, when I read it the first time, I wasn't sure who was speaking here, and I realize now from your introduction that you are the speaker, and you're addressing someone who's in Eastern Europe. But without that context, I was a little bit lost at the beginning. Though certainly one gets grounded once you start to talk about the movie situation and the movie recommendations.
I thought the same, but then again, I copped on then with the Eastern European mystery part. I also was notorious. Sorry, I'm going to sound stupid here. Claude Rains. Who's Claude Rains?
In the movie or in general?
So no, I know the movie Notorious, but I just don't remember who Claude Rains is.
He's the he's the Nazi that's got the uranium in the wine bottles.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. But as you're talking in there, the actors' names rather than the characters' names, and I was just confused. That's all.
Yes.
Also, didn't Claude Rains play the Invisible Man in one of the science fiction movies?
He did. He also played Captain Renault in Casablanca. He was a great character actor, but he played villains supremely well. And that's a great Hitchcock plot because Grant is working for the government, and he and Ingrid Bergman have had a history, but she's being basically pimped out to spy on the Nazis, and Cary Grant is her contact. So he has to let her go, but he hates that she's doing it, but he has to put up with it because that's also his job. But the description at the end, of course, is the summary of the emotional state that the speaker is in. And I take your point about the confusion at the beginning. I would only say that when you begin something with calling out my dear, it's so much like a letter to someone. It's so much like a love letter that I thought that would come across.
Yeah, no, there's definitely the sense of a love relationship between them, Al, but I wasn't sure if this was an allusion to something else. But I see now that it's actually the speaker of the poem speaking about his difficult relationship with this person who's far away.
Yeah, it's quite real. So I just wrote about it because that's what it was. And then as I was thinking about the situation, I thought, because this woman has asked me for films for her to watch. And I thought, boy, she ought to see Notorious because in a way, it's got a connection to our situation. So that's another one I've never read. I get to read poems on this show that I have not read in public at any other time. And this is an example of one. So As is the one I'm going to read last because it's just too long for most public settings. Well, okay.
Now, let me just ask a question. Does somebody have audio on in the background? I hear some background speaking.
Yeah, we're getting ghosting, and I'm not sure what's causing that, but it's one of our setups, one of our technical setups. Is if you're listening through speakers at your computer, are either of you doing that?
No, not me, Al.
No.
Okay, so sometimes you're getting some feedback from the room that's echoing. Sometimes it shows up in the final track. Sometimes it's not as noticeable. We'll just have to see.
It's very faint though, and no one in my apartment is making noise, so don't blame me.
No, it's not it's not a room thing. It's a technical thing. But anyway, that's the. I don't think we need worry. And anyway, we're now down to the final trio. So John, your final word here.
Okay, this is an autobiographical poem. It appeared in my third book, as I referred to before, No One Leaves the World Unhurt, and it is called The Haunted Mansion, and it's from my old friend,
yes,
Robert Sandor, with whom I've lost touch. The Haunted Mansion in Long Branch, New Jersey, employed locals with hatchets and wigs to function as psychoneurotic lunatics. For us, Holy Mother of Christ, it was bad. The locals with hatchets, wearing wigs, coming at us down the dark hallways. Oh, sweet Jesus, it was bad. And it didn't help that we were tripping on acid as they came at us down the dark hallways. How bad could it really get? It didn't help that we were tripping on acid, and down you went to the floor in shock. That was how good the bad could get. To think that we had paid for this, and there you were on the floor in shock. That was certainly real enough. But this was what we liked. We paid for it. You'd said back then, I wish that I were me. Now that was real, or it was real enough. Our haunted mansion burned down years ago, and I too wish that I were me, and with you again on that pier tonight. But it burned down long ago, the haunted mansion in Long Branch, New Jersey.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So educate me. This is one of those forms where the lines recur. Is it a specific one?
Yeah, it's a pantoum. It's a Malaysian form called a pantoum. And that doesn't really have anything to do with the content. I just like the idea of trying to write a pantoum, address, dealing with this sort of a subject. Which
well, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Which I hope this comes across as humorous, but also relatively serious.
Oh, it definitely does that. You may not have intended to use a pantoum as a form for this, as a vehicle for this particular expression, but I saw a connection in that there is a sense of unreality in the fragmentation of the repeated lines that gives a kind of knowing that this is a tripping on acid poem, that made sense to me, that I'd be given the information, but not in a linear way, in a kind of a shattered and reconstituted way. So I thought that the form fit the content really well. I just didn't. It looked to me like it must be a commonly used form with which I'm just not familiar. What's the actual structure?
Well, it's a structure that you can go either long with or short with. And you basically, I think that if you look at the poem, it kind of demonstrates it. You have a repeating second and third, second and fourth line, which then repeat at different intervals in the second stanza. And then you take the second and fourth line from that stanza and then you repeat the third stanza.
Okay.
So one of the best pantoums I've ever read, at least by an American, is the Pantoum of the Great Depression by Donald Justice, which is a heartbreakingly beautiful poem.
Yeah. I actually knew Donald, yeah. Can I should know this, I presume, but I don't know who Robert Sander is.
Oh, he's an old friend of mine, the guy that I was tripping on acid with on this.
Oh, I thought that there was some literary, when you said Robert Sander, you know what I mean?
He's famous, but not for that.
That's why I lost touch with him, Greg. He's not a literary guy.
But but when Al responded, it sounded like he was well known when he said, "Oh, it's Robert Sanders." So I thought I didn't know it was a literary person. I didn't know.
I hope he's not listening to this or won't be, because we were very good friends back in the day, and I wouldn't want him to feel hurt. But we've lost touch a long time ago. He has his family, I have my family, and we just lost touch. But we did have these great experiences together.
If you're afraid of that, you're going to have to ask Al to cut this bit.
But wait, Al, I want to go back to what you said about your explication of why the pantoum seemed to work with the content of this poem. And all I can say is I wish I had said that. It was very nicely expounded.
Well, as Oscar Wilde said to whoever that other guy was, you will. Feel free. You can claim that you had it in mind all along.
Well, it's all Al Basil.
I like that one, and that's a good example of what I was saying before about range, because this poem, even beyond the fact that the form, at least for me, was a novelty that I didn't recognize off the bat. You're covering a lot of ground stylistically in just a handful of poems. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Al.
Hey.
Gregory?
Penultimate.
Okay. I'm going to finish up with a poem called The Great Ship. It's from the last book, No More Time, which was a book we mentioned earlier. Made out of mostly of 26 sonnets, alphabetical, covering in terza rima with a couplet at the end, love poems, redirecting I suppose, trying to redirect, excuse me, Dante's Terzarima line in his underworld, and in the Christian underworld, we seem to have forgotten that there were animals and plants and creatures around us, and I think that's the way the Christian world has affected the Western civilization, and that's why we're in such a fucked up situation environmentally and so forth. And
Okay.
then I think that was but this is a poem in between that it's split in by more. It's the 13 poems on one side and 13 the other side of that Terzarima sonnet of the different animals and plants that are purgatory, hell, and heaven, or put in is something more political, and this one comes from that called The Great Ship, and you know that everybody knows, I suppose, that the song when the great ship, the Titanic, was going down.
Yep.
Nearer my God to thee. So there's no need for me. There's an epigraph, because I'm a non-believer myself, but the great ship, even non-believers sang for the solace of song. It's only 10 or 11 lines. Later tonight it's a turn cold, the old, sudden, sharp iceberg cold of New England. Crickets, cicadas, grasshoppers and frogs play on. What their song, their wing music are saying, we can't say, except they must know already that the ice has gashed a gaping hole in the hull of Indian summer, and they are the quartet that comes out on deck and plays away as the great ship goes down. We listen quietly from our deck's lifeboat. Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Play on, brave, noble souls, play on.
What a metaphor. That is a strong metaphor.
Yeah, again, you're making these equations between two different things that are that you play out very nicely. The analogy between a sinking ship and the end of summer.
Oh yeah, punched a hole in Indian summer. What a line.
That's so good.
Well, and also the planet, you know. I mean, I was thinking larger even than that, you know.
Yeah.
The ship being the planet, you know.
No, it's a wonderful eco poem, and it's very true.
Sorry, I shouldn't be saying what my poem means.
Well, that's okay. It's very clear that it's a poem about ecology.
Yeah, but I like the music.
Yeah.
I like the use of music.
I should have sang it, Al. I forgot. I've always been meaning to sing it, and I haven't read this poem for a long time, and I did this very quickly last night or yesterday, and put 10 poems, you know, and I should have read them, and I didn't read them for a long time, and I can't sing that, but it's all the better for that. Nearer, my God, to thee.
Okay.
All right, like you might have turned you all off and break the camera and break the sound.
Did you write this just last night, really?
No. I picked them last night.
Oh, okay.
John. I picked it and I did it quickly. No, I wrote it a long time ago.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to come back to the music, because the way that you extend the metaphor is to take the music down into the insect kingdom, and they're the ones that are singing. I enjoy the craft involved in extending the metaphor here. It's lovely. Yeah. Although it's a grim image.
Yes and no. Hopefully, like it is, maybe even the old crickets and the cicadas and the frogs got some solace in singing, as they knew that they must know that winter's coming, cold is coming the last night before the cold frost in autumn.
Right, like the quartet on the sinking Titanic, they presumably got some sort of spiritual pleasure from playing as the ship went down.
Well, as we all do. I mean, we all know that things are not great in the world, and we all know that we're all
Yes.
going to die, and we miss people and so forth. So the solace, as you both and Al said earlier on, that there is some solace or some help with each other with the poems, because we are not isolated, as Al
Yep.
said.
Absolutely. Now, is the phrase solace of singing, I know it's in the epigraph, but did you write the epigraph? Is that your phrase?
Want me to tell a lie? No.
Why not? If it's a good one.
Well, I tell you what, and I've never been asked that question, and I've never thought of saying it, but I wanted to get in the idea that to get away from like people dropping on their knees and saying, I'm Christian and near my God to thee and so forth.
Yep.
And I wanted to say that I was a non-believer, but they did sing the song, and the guys, the quartet, did play on the board as the ship was going down. So I tried to bring it away from that to just general, even
Sure.
that. So I actually kind of made it up, to be honest, and I put it.
But that's okay. But it's a terrific sentiment, and it's a great phrase. The solace of singing is.
And sure, aren't we all survivors, really, even right now on the good ship, huh?
It's like going back to Finn McCool and the music of What Happens.
No, that was different. Sorry, well, that was said in a. Well, we won't go there.
Of course, it's different, but it's a phrase that is bigger. It's bigger than what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So that's what I like. It's the solace of singing is a good phrase. So
let me just say, one poem that's in your pack that you, I guess, are not good, that I love, is called No More Time. And it seems that this poem, The Great Ship, is talking to that poem, No More Time, which is certainly a poem about the earth suffering and
Us all, everything.
dying.
Really. Yeah, but Al is right too. I don't. I should. I'm finished now, but I'm very grateful for being able to say all my poems with us. And maybe we should go on now to Al, huh?
well, I won't.
I'm getting embarrassed. I'm getting embarrassed here, and I thought I was beyond embarrassment. All right.
Well,
Thank you, John, and thank you, Al.
There's no harm done.
Well, no, there is no harm. That's the opposite I'm saying, you of.
Well, I guess.
What's it now? Al, what's it? I'm sorry, I have to ask you a question. When you said there's no harm done, is there some way that I unknowingly insulted somebody?
No.
Okay, sorry.
No.
Because I'd be in my sleep tonight, waking up. So, Christ, what did I say? Al had to say to me, no harm done. Oh,
All is
I can
well.
sleep better now.
All is well.
Thank you.
All ashore that's going ashore. All right, well, I'm going to read this last poem. It's a long poem, but it's rather complicated because of its subject, and because we're now living in a time when Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and we're going back more or less to the time that some of us lived in before Roe versus Wade existed. This is really a poem that deals on one level with abortion, and on another level with the outcomes of life seen from farther down the road, that looks back on what was and what might have been. And so in this poem, the speaker encounters three animals, each of which is the embodied spirit of a child which he would have been the father to, except the children were never brought to term. And so in this poem, these children come to him and tell him of the lives that they would have had they lived in the context in which they were born. And it's called The Winnowing. And I wrote it on Father's Day about 6 years ago. They came as animals, like deer, appearing at the fringe of trees behind my house. I, lying under bright sun in the silence of the heavy afternoon. They glided one by one across the grass and dipped their heads to drink from the white plaster basin of the chipped bird bath, brimming still from last night's shower. Then they looked at me, their eyes widened, quiet, glistening, as though they had to get accustomed to the light, as I would to the sudden darkness of the house if I stepped in there for a moment. The first approached, a fawn, with budding antlers, velvet nubs just broken through above its brow. Gentle and unafraid, it drew near to where I lay and seemed to speak. I am the boy who is to be your firstborn. Though both too young, you love my mother well, and you will choose to sacrifice the future you expect out of a sense of duty. Without knowing it at first, you'll hold that against her, and finally me. And I will feel that. You will stay together. Your unhappiness will grow with me, and I will blame myself beyond all reason, working hard to please, to make things right. When I take my life at 17, feeling powerless, my means will be undemonstrative, and you won't see it coming. Nor will my apology left in a careful note make sense to you. No one else will understand your pain, and you will stay together, even after that, unable to live past the sharing. Sad-eyed, he moved away. As though I held out some threat, a second stag approached, with eyes more wary, antlers razor-pointed, branching wide, bolder of seeming voice. You'll meet my mother on a trip, both far from home in a bewildering city, not knowing the language of that place. You'll find a haven in each other's voice. Brief lovers, you'll return to different countries. When my mother writes to tell you there'll be no thought you'll be together. When she says she means to raise me by herself, without demand, reproach, or even expectation, your protest is at best half-hearted and short-lived. You go on with the life you've planned. Until my mother dies, I never know you. I'll seek you out then, thinking you untroubled. My heart set against you, even though she always held you blameless. Envious, but needing your acceptance, I'll appear and find you open but disabled by unreasonable guilt. Caught in that current, we'll circle then, helpless and endlessly trying to approach, yet keeping distance. Tilting his head, he slanted off, but stayed nearby as a third approached, a doe that bobbed her head and nuzzled at my hand. I am your youngest child, I seem to hear, held by her quiet eyes. My mother will be only 20 when you meet, and yet she'll seem to understand you and accept what you will become. Her love will reach a part of you you thought unreachable, and joy will have a freshly minted meaning. But joy in common use soon wears its features down, and it becomes dumb to the touch. Her feelings all will dull, and she will be beyond your power to console, despondent, sinking where you cannot follow, or choose to follow if you could. In every moment she compares her state to yours, she'll slip down deeper, dropping out of reach. And out of her despair, I will be born, bearing the inexplicable, the gift to grow against the odds of my surroundings, untouched by trouble, generous and loving, patient with the limits of my strength. I'll understand her distance and return a warmth that somehow will not drive her down. I'll give her what she can't accept from you and ease the burden of your broken love. I'll apply that grace throughout her life and be a balm to you when she is gone, healing those places rubbed raw by a life in harness to a sleds that couldn't move. You'll feel that I'm the best thing in your life. She lifted up her head and drifted off, still gazing at me as it seemed, intently. The three of them, in a deliberate way, stepped carefully across the grass toward the line of trees. After a subtle swishing of crushed pine needles made its mark upon the silence of the afternoon, the darkness of the trees beyond concealed and closed them up, leaving the yard, it seemed, untouched. I lay there, thinking how they saw their futures as clearly as I did my past. And yet, in my own life, not one of them had lived. Their mothers never bore them. They went on to different lives beyond our time together, with marriages to others, but no children. I'd somehow blamed myself for that and been blamed in return, though we'd agreed each time that it was better not to let them live. Better, perhaps. There still seemed little good could come of it. Each time, we'd split apart not long after, as the faith we had about the future shriveled up and fell away. What would have been had always stayed a question. Now, these creatures came after a lifetime on my path with neither blessing nor rebuke, as though they'd lived their story. And those three women whom I'd loved and I were the only ones deprived of it. Our choices had no power over them. Their lives already written, undisturbed, before their birth. Only our own could change. That winnowing has left me in my life by my own choice, last of my line, alone. I rose as clouds came drifting from the west to interrupt the rush of summer light, and went into the house to fix my dinner.
That's a fabulous poem, Al. That is the best poem I've ever read, easy by you. I mean, it's a really fine poem, regardless of who wrote it. It's fabulous, man.
Thank you.
That's a special poem. I don't know, have you published it?
Yes, it's in my second book, Tonesmith.
It's really good, though. Can I suggest just something, one or two small things, and just so you think about them?
Sure.
That have confused me a little bit.
Sure.
The first line kind of got me a little bit, they came as animals and then like deer. And I said, like animals, like they came as animals and then like deer. I'd much prefer just simply they came as deer, appearing or like deer. They came like deer. The animals gets very confusing there. No, that for me, I mean. Now, just think about it. I don't want you to say anything, and I'm not at all sure I'm right. It's a fabulous poem. I would have liked to have written it myself, and that's as good as it gets as far as I'm concerned. But at the very end, sad-eyed, he moved away. Oh, yeah. One other place that confused me. The first child comes as a fawn, and then we have a second stag further down. And I don't think you need to say second because it's differentiated from the stag as a big, you understand me?
Yeah.
The second is confusing. It sounds as if are we missing out on another stag. I mean, the other one is really only a fawn just about to become a full-grown one, and I thought that was confusing. And there was one other place that I just in the last page that I printed off. She lifted up her head and drifted off, still gazing at me, as it seemed, intently. And then the three of them, in a deliberate way, if you don't mind, just let me just say this, bring up the step and just say down below, bringing back carefully across, deliberately step back carefully across the grass so that we know they're going back into the underworld, we don't know there, like, are they approaching you or going back? You understand me?
Gotcha.
And if you moved the three of them in a deliberate way, stepped, and then back carefully across, I think that's all I would say. Well done, thank you.
Well, I will tell you this. All three of those suggestions are good suggestions. And if I'd gotten them before we went to press, I would have made changes. However, if we go to a second printing, I'll make those changes. So thank you.
Hey, Al, I make changes non-stop. I have a special edition just out of poems already published, and I've made changes in that. And now I've made changes of the special edition. So just, you understand? So
yes.
You'll get a chance to publish that again.
Well,
if I ever do an anthology of poems I like, I'll put that poem in the winner.
Great, thank you.
And Al, it's very haunting. The beginning, the way you have them coming out of the woods. I would agree with what Greg said about those first couple lines, clarifying that, but the overall description of them, it's very haunting. And what you're basically dealing with, it seems to me, is the idea of reverse ghosts, right?
Yes.
They're reverse ghosts, not the ghosts of people who have died, but the ghosts of people who haven't yet come into the world. And that's a very beautiful, complicated thought.
As if they came into the world, and then he fleshes out their lives and everything, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, the idea, it's, I meditated on the idea of these children who were never born, because what we always say is, well, they never had a chance to have a life. And then I thought, well, suppose your whole life exists in a way with you before you're born. And even if you're not born, it's still with you and it's still played out. So although they're not born, they know the life that they would have had, and they know how their lives would have affected their parents' lives too.
Yeah, there is actually both Wordsworth and Henry Vaughan talk about a pre-life, of the before the soul comes into the world. It's just what you've done there now is a little bit uncanny. So I wouldn't say too much about it, and I wouldn't talk about it too much. I wouldn't even say about the abortion. It's just that you're pinning it down there too much. It's just about the children could have died naturally in the mother. I just let people come to it in their own way.
Well, it does. There is a passage in there where the prospective parents decide not to let the child live.
Well, that's fine, but let people think about it. Let people come to that.
Sure. Well, I explicated it in my introduction, but people who read this poem in the book will not know that. So I agree with you.
It's kind of closing it down into
sure.
I've said enough.
Yeah, when you come to this the first time, Al, raw, and you don't have that specific context. It's just sort of wide open and spooky and
a touch of Robert Frost about that spookiness a little bit.
Yeah. There's something I don't know, something just
anyway, well done.
Uncanny about it. Uncanny.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to leave it that way for the general reader, but I wanted to give you guys some insight into the machine, how the sausage got made.
Sorry, can you just one thing I will ask you, the winnowing. That's a title I think that Seamus used somewhere. It's a very sort of. Can you just explain what winnowing means? I'd have to look exactly. I have a good idea, but can you just explain what it means, please? To the crops or whatever it does.
Yeah, when you get the grain, you separate the wheat from the chaff, and the wheat is kept, and the chaff is cast away. So it's about the act of deciding what to keep and what to let go.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that since you have the animals, but I just think that it's a title I've heard before, and I think it deserves even.
I think you're right.
Even Father's Day 2016 is very good. It's kind of shocking, I mean, it's very good because you don't get what's coming. You don't get until after you finished it, and then you have to think about it a bit, and how they even come back and have lived their lives. No, it's very good. Well done.
Well, I'm happy to hear all of that. Our revels now are ended, however.
Wait, can I just put one quick question out there to you and to Greg?
Sure.
I look at form as a way to sort of control pain and mitigate grief. And I know a lot of poets disagree with that. They want people to howl and scream and spill the glass and let the water run all over. They don't like the idea of a container. But I think that form as a container is a very powerful image. And I like I said, I see it as a way to control pain and mitigate grief by controlling one of the few things that we can control, which is language. And I'm just wondering if either of you had thoughts on that in your own writings about grief and loss.
I don't quite get you, John. Sorry.
Well,
are you talking?
Many poets I know, Greg, they believe that to write in form is to be too fussy, and it's not the way to approach raw, heartfelt emotions.
John, I get you now. John, let me be vulgar again. Let me just say donkey shit this time. Although donkey shit, it's an insult. It's an insult.
Right.
We're trapped already in the word.
Right. I agree with you.
We're trapped already in the word. The idea that one should not use tradition is disastrous and indicates what a lot of the 20th century people have done. Separated themselves from the good parts of tradition. No, I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I got arrested outside the White House, but we have trapped ourselves off from the world of farms and how the farmlands and so forth, going back into the using the traditional as well as the open and other things that have been opened up since. But we're all trapped anyway. You're trapped in the letter. You're trapped in the word. That you're trapped in the form. Right. Sometimes you're opened up in the form. I mean, the sonnet is a scanty plot of ground is a way of being freed as well. So I think I don't like people making pronouncements about how one should write. They can do it for themselves, but they should not make it on anybody else.
One terrible misconception that is current here in the United States now, among many political factions, is that if a poet writes in form, they're Republicans, which is absurd.
Which I write in form, and I've gone out to Standing Rock and I've been arrested, and people say, look, when I go to demonstrations, I wear a collar and tie. I've been arrested in a collar and tie, and people thought I was a spy for the thing because I talked to everybody, the police. And of course, if you can't make contact with the people you disagree with and see the similarity, then you're doing the same as they did, actually. And so it's disastrous.
We have big problems with the United States right now, as you probably know.
It's the same everywhere, though. It's the same in Ireland. It's the same in, it's the denim versus the suits, the open form versus the formalist. It's terrible. It's so
Gentlemen, I want to try to answer John's question. from my vantage point. I think that John, I agree with the way that you describe it. I would say that for me, writing in form is a way of making sense of strong feelings, and just from a personal approach to technique, it's easier for me to write in form because I have fewer acceptable choices. So, you know what I'm saying?
Like Greg said, when you're writing in form, you're trapped, and it makes you choose things that you would not normally choose.
Well, it frees you up not to have to worry about the form on one level. I mean, when I write sonnets, I generally break about complicity in our lives, because Raleigh and Spencer brought the sonnet into the English language for the most part, and lived and worked and owned Cork City. So I'm writing under that background. But it's to cut ourselves off from the past. And also, yes, it frees us up. And also, there's for and against, but it should come from the subject, not from being forced on the subject.
Certainly. Absolutely. Hey, look.
Sorry. I feel very strongly about. Sorry if I'm a bit much emphatic. Excuse me.
No, not a problem, as long as I get my words in too.
No,
we're all on the same page here.
You can just rub me. You can rub me out, Al.
I could, but I won't. Look, I write songs, I write plays, I write poems. If I get an idea, it tells me what it wants to be. If I get an idea that tells me that it's a song, I write a song. It's the idea that it's the conception that suggests form to me, and then the form conditions the expression. Those are the three steps. The idea tells me what the form is, and then working within the form gives me the room to push against the form to express what I'm trying to say. So it's always a tug of war between what I'm trying to say and what the form allows me to say, whether it's a song or a play or I write fiction, whatever thing that I'm doing. But you're taking it a step deeper, John, and I like that. The idea that the act of trying to bring that particular kind of order out of chaotic emotion or strong emotion is a better way of coping with strong emotion. And I buy that, at least for me. But I agree with Greg. I wouldn't presume to try to put that onto anybody else, except to have them consider it as a possibility that they might try.
Well said.
Because I'm a peacemaker, damn it.
Why do you no? Hey. No. I saw. Excuse me. I hope I don't sound fractious. I'm just
no.
But no. Hey, now you're at it again. Now, Al. The last time you said no harm done. Now you're saying that you're a peacekeeper. But me and John feel the same. I think. I think we all feel the same. I don't think what you said is any different than what I said, but I said some more.
Yes.
And there's no.
I agree with all of that, but when you're all agreeing but still talking, there's a kind of peace that is in order. So why don't we conclude the proceedings, and then after we stop recording, we can keep talking. How's that?
I must have my dinner. I need food. My blood sugar level is going down.
You're one of those guys. Okay.
My blood pressure is gone up.
I don't like your comments.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm done now.
Okay, Greg. Thank you. Pleasure to read with you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Pleasure to read with you.